Hello, and welcome to another Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. My name is Brenda Holt, and I am with AARP Arizona. We are the nation's largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to empowering people 50 and older to choose how they live as they age. And with a nationwide presence of nearly 38 million members across the nation and approximately 900,000 right here in Arizona, we work to strengthen communities and we advocate for what matters most to families, such as health security, financial stability, and personal fulfillment. During the month of September, we will raise the awareness and priority engagements of AARP's offering for older adults while helping workers stay competitive at work. AARP is a wise friend and fierce defender of older workers and has program offerings and resources that align with each of these consumer pillars. We are a wise friend in a rapidly changing job market. You can count on AARP to help you navigate your job search and career path and fight back against age bias. We are also a fierce defender. AARP is fighting to strengthen age discrimination laws, increase protections, and help companies across the country foster age-diverse workplaces that value experience. For more information and resources, please visit us at aarp.org/work or aarp.org/Arizona. Thank you again for attending today's session.
Folks, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall Shore.
Hello and good evening. I want to welcome you all to Arizona History Happy Hour. I am so happy that you can join us this evening. Oh my gosh, have we got a great show for you this evening? We're going to have a really exciting time tonight because we're going to talk about some really cool Arizona history that probably not a lot of people know much about. And so that's really the fun of what we're getting ready to do this evening. So I'm just so happy that you can join us this evening. So thank you so much. All right. So I want to welcome you on this lovely September 8th of 2022. Now, what I want to talk a little bit about is, we all know, hopefully, the news today about Queen Elizabeth II passing away today with a reign of over 80 years. I'm sorry, 70 years. 70 years and like 200 and some odd days. So happy that you could all join us. Sad to hear that news. Now, you also know back in 1850 on this date, Congress passed a bill making Arizona and New Mexico one territory, with the proviso that nothing in this act shall be construed to inhibit the United States from dividing said territory into or more territories. So we could have been even larger than what we are now, or smaller, because there would have been more states. So, but that did not happen. Now, it is also World Literacy Day, and it's a day where we just want to create awareness and concern for literacy problems that exist not just in our own communities, but really globally and internationally as well. It's also Star Trek Day because back on September 8th in 1966, on this date, 56 years ago, Star Trek appeared on NBC in that 8:30 p.m. time slot for the first time. Now, and last but not least, it is Ampersand Day, giving rise to that odd little It's actually kind of a mushed together E and T from Latin, meaning et, which means and. So we are celebrating that today as well. So happy that you can join us as we're celebrating so much. Now, what can you expect here on Arizona History Happy Hour? Well, we've got a little bit of Arizona music history. We've got From the Vault, as well as Little Arizona. We cover some trivia, as well as a beverage. And always a super special guest. And tonight is no slouch in that at all. All right. So my name is Marshall Shore. And how did I get here? Well, a little over 22 years ago, I was working in Brooklyn at a little library and decided to trade up from that Carnegie Library that had snow sometimes to a library in South Phoenix that had no snow. But what it did have was a rich oral tradition of the community. And that really got me thinking and looking at Arizona in different ways. So, when we moved here, we promptly moved into a beautiful 1956 ranch. Now, people call our house the time capsule because it literally looks just like it did back in the day. I mean, all that buttercream yellow tile that still stands and looks beautiful. And, as soon as we got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. And, I quickly realized that that was not the case. There was tons of history. Why, in fact, there was that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we all know and love today. All those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed through on their way to somewhere else. And after the war, many of them moved here in huge numbers, and just as a way to find new ways of life and forever changing the state. Now, I'm also called the hip historian, which means I get to have lots of fun with Arizona history. I mean, we're doing some stuff with local buzz, so we've been doing a variety of videos. We were just out in Goodyear shooting some fun videos. So you'll be seeing that on all different social medias as well. So watch out for those. We also have coming up in November, dinner and a seance down in Bisbee at the historic Greenway House. That's going to be really interesting. As well as on the 17th, we have the first of the season, the Haunted History Walking Tour. So look forward to seeing you there. As well as,
Hi there, my name is Cece Marie. Join me for Banned Book Week at the Allen House on the evening of Friday, September 23rd, where I will be reading The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss.
So that's going to be a lot of fun. We have that coming up in just a few weeks at the Allen House. I think we have 8 readers on a variety of banned books, including The Sneetches with Cece. And now, so we have our beverage. And, there was talk about what could it be. And so it's always kind of fun to see what PJ comes up with. And so tonight it is the Desert Aviator. It's dark sky gin, a little pomegranate liqueur, some lime, some tangerine, some pineapple, and chipotle and hibiscus. So that way it's a little bit of spice. Now it's really great with PJ because he makes all of this, puts it in a little jar. So all I have to do is this. And there we go, the Desert Aviator. And PJ handed it to me. He was like, "You're going to really like that one." It's got a nice little tang from the hibiscus. Very nice. I indeed do like that. All right. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about Little Arizona. And I thought, it'd be kind of fun to talk about a little town called Happy Jack. So Happy Jack is just under 600 people in Coconino County, in the middle of the Coconino National Forest, was established back in 1947 as a logging camp. Now, originally the town was placed on Onion Flats and originally was called Yellow Jacket, but there were so many other towns across the country called Yellow Jacket, they had to change. Now, the post office was established in 47, and then it wound up moving. After about 30 years, the logging town closed down and moved a few miles away. And so the town reestablished itself in a whole new location. Now, there's always debate in terms of where that name Happy Jack came from. Did it come from a cheerful lumberjack, or was it Happy Jack, who was also a criminal in Wyoming? He was a bandit, and supposedly he was committing crimes, and someone decided to name the town Happy Jack after him. If you get up there, you can stay at the Lodge and RV Park, which has been around since the early 70s. And they offer all kinds of amenities from a general store to a restaurant, and well worth checking out. I mean, just look at that beautiful snow. And you can choose to be in it and then choose to come back and not be in it. All right. So here on Arizona History Happy Hour, I love that we have a great special guest this evening. And so, hello, Ryan.
Hi, Marshall.
How are you doing this evening?
I am just great.
Good. So happy that you're here joining us. So for folks that don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in Arizona since 2006. I'm currently the airport manager at Chandler Municipal Airport over on the east side of town. I come from an aviation family. I'm third generation, I'm proud to say. And hopefully I'm raising the fourth generation, my son and daughter. I'm an aircraft owner, and essentially everything in my life is centered around airplanes and airports, and I'm pretty proud of that. So, and with that, outside of professional life, I spend a great deal of my time with aviation history. I'm currently the sitting president of the Phoenix wing of the American Aviation Historical Society, and I'm one of several vice presidents of the Arizona Aviation Historical Group, which is located here in Phoenix. Spend a great deal of time researching aviation and flight's heritage, pretty significant amount of time preserving what we can of that heritage, and taking opportunities like this evening to spread the gospel of flight, as it were. Right?
Well, indeed. I mean, because, I think it's so funny that so many small towns have airports, and that used to be a way that people got around. Absolutely. Before there were all these fancy highways.
Right. Yeah. And that's, it's still that way. We've got over 7,700 airports in the country, and we still use it that way. It's there's 67 here in the state alone that are public use, and it's still used that way. At my airport at Chandler, on a daily basis, we average just north of 600 operations every day. As of last month, we're the 47th busiest airport in the country, and we're actually behind several valley airports that are busier than us. So it's still, the sky's still very active. Folks are still using it for just that.
That's incredible. I just saw that a friend was flying back from Burning Man.
Yep. Yeah, that's
and I guess that must be a popular way to get there in the middle of the desert.
It's a lot quicker.
I do not doubt that.
I've flown over it, and that country looks really great to fly over.
I would agree with that. All right. So we have a little bit of trivia.
Sure.
Now, our trivia here is not, if we're used to doing bar trivia, we do our trivia much differently, because it's not about what you know, but it's more about what you're going to, the stories you're going to hear. And so all of our questions are multiple choice. And so the goal is to have fun. Take a stab if you don't know the answer. I won't be shocked how low scores will be on this one, but great stories. And that's always the fun. Now, you can keep track of this. Anita has a special notebook. I've got a friend who, for some reason, likes to do it on his arm and then send me a photo of it, I guess to make sure he didn't cheat or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
Whatever makes you happy, that's what we say. Just go for it. So our first question is, what was the Phoenix Goodyear Airport's first name? That means it wasn't Phoenix Goodyear Airport. All right. So was it Goodyear Airport? Was it Phoenix Goodyear Airport, Litchfield Park, or Cotton Airfield? What do you think was the first name for the Phoenix Goodyear Airport? All right. What was the first production project at the airport? A, flying boats. B, cotton processing. Aircraft tire manufacturing. Or D, plastic research and testing. All right. So what do you think was the first production project at the airport? The second major production project at Goodyear was the PB-4Y Privateer. What was the aircraft's mission? Was it long-range bombing? B, low-level anti-shipping? C, reconnaissance? Or D, search and rescue? All right. So remember, if you don't know the answer, just take a guess. All right. So after World War II, what was the primary mission of the NAFLP? Was it aircraft modification? Was it aircraft storage, which is B? C, aircraft demolition? Or D, all of the above? Question 5. The Boeing B-29 is known as the aircraft which dropped atomic bombs on Japan in World War II. What else is it famous for dropping? Hopefully not engines. All right. Okay. And that's not one of the options. Okay. That's a good thing. Okay. So A, paratroopers. B, propaganda leaflets. C, special operatives. Or D, other aircraft. All right. Question 6. Which brand of service first introduced the Sidewinder missile? Was it the U.S. Air Force? B, the U.S. Navy? I'm sorry, the U.S. Army? C, the U.S. Navy? Or D, the U.S. Marine Corps? Which brand of service first introduced the Sidewinder missile? Which branch of service had the first aircraft specifically designed to carry a nuclear bomb? All right. Was it the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Navy, or the U.S. Marine Corps? Which do you think it was? All right. Question 8. When did the first airborne warning and control system, which is an acronym AWAC, was it AWA? How would you pronounce the acronym?
AWACS.
AWACS. Okay. Was it AWACS Aircraft Sea Service? These are the aircraft that look like they're carrying a flying saucer. So when did it first go airborne? Was it 1956? B, 1962? C, 1968? Or D, 1977? All right, moving on to question 9. All right. What famous aerial demonstration team called Goodyear home? A, the Acrojets. B, the Thunderbirds. C, the Sky Blazers. Or D, the Blue Angels. All right. Question 10. What famous Arizona public figure both flew a Blue Angel aircraft and was an active member of the Arizona National Guard? Was it A, Barry Goldwater, B, Mark Kelly, C, Martha McSally, or D, John McCain? All right. So what do you think that is? And but that is not our last question. We have one last bonus question. How long did it take the Naval Air Force facility at Litchfield Park to close? Was it A, 6 months, B, 2 years, C, 5 years, or D, 7 years? All right. Well, you are all trying to lock in that final answers for all of those. We're going to take a little bit of an era music break. And so I thought it would be fun to talk about the only thing I could connect music-wise to airplanes, and that would be Linda Carter, because as Wonder Woman, she flew an invisible jet. And so Linda Carter actually first started as a musician at the age of 5, appearing on the Lou King Show. She then later on went on to join various bands, making her way from Vegas to the Catskills. And then she won Miss World in the early 70s. After that, she appeared on a variety of TV shows with the Jackson Family, Tom Jones, the Muppets, Ray Charles, Kenny Rogers. She also released her first album, and she has been doing things ever since. In fact, she actually just a couple of years ago released a new album, got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and has been showing up in movies and see, I like someone else is going planes and music. I know. Well, and don't forget to do Arizona in that, because Jefferson Airplane would have been an easy one, but I couldn't think of an Arizona connection. And so yeah, so that was the fun of coming up with an invisible jet. So, all right. So let's go on to some answers. So Ryan, what was Goodyear, or the Phoenix Goodyear Airport's first name?
It was actually Naval Air Facility Litchfield Park, as you can see in the photo there. That was the base insignia from 1942 until 1968 at its closure. And one of the funny things is all of the base addresses up until the 60s was Phoenix, Arizona, because it was noted as being 20 miles outside of town. And it was picked. The location was picked for a very specific reason. It was next to what was then Highway 80. It's now MC 85, and it was located at a point which the Southern Pacific Rail line turned, which is a natural place for the railroad to put in a spur line, which is necessary if you're going to have a major manufacturing center. The railroad needs to work with you to bring you all that steel and aluminum. And Paul Litchfield picked it. He at the time was the chairman and CEO of Goodyear Tire and Rubber. Had learned to grow Pima cotton for his tires in Arizona to replace the Egyptian cotton that was getting sunk during the First World War. And that's how Goodyear Farms was founded, of course. And Mr. Litchfield was an unabashed aviation fanatic. In fact, a graduate of MIT, shortly before he passed, he went back and delivered the keynote address at one of their graduations and stated that humanity's greatest accomplishment was flight. He was a dyed-in-the-wool airplane nut.
I had no idea that he was so into air travel. I mean, that's why it wasn't, dirigibles and all kinds of fun things.
Well, yeah. I mean, the really kind of cool thing is that he was a visionary in a lot of ways, right? I mean, we talk about corporate aviation today, right? Guys flying around in business jets. Paul Litchfield was one of the first guys to kind of zero in on this and go, this is something I need to pay attention to. So the Goodyear Airport we have now is actually Goodyear Airport number 3. The second one was just due west of the Wigwam, up in the Litchfield Park area, and it was a square landing. There's just a big square plop down on the ground. I really haven't been able to pinpoint where Goodyear Airport 1 was. We think it was nothing more than a field road, because what we've been able to find out is Mr. Litchfield actually purchased 3 sequential serial number Curtiss JN4 Jennies. So open cockpit biplanes. If anybody's ever seen The Great Waldo Pepper, it's what Waldo Pepper flew, what Robert Redford flew in that movie when you first meet him. So he bought those because it was either bouncing along desert roads for over an hour to get from Phoenix out to Goodyear Farms, or you could take off from a little airport then known as the Farm. It's now Sky Harbor International Airport. And you could have a 15-minute flight out to the farms and land. So he was one of the first people to kind of clue in that aircraft were kind of force maximizers in business, that we could use these things. And we have photographs of him actually getting out of his private Lockheed Lodestar in the late 40s near the Wigwam and at Goodyear Airport. He traveled the country in high power, high speed, what were at the time both civilian and warplanes. And he was just an absolute fanatic about it to this degree. If nothing else says it, this will. So when the war started, he was CEO of Goodyear Tire and Rubber. Then the president made the claim that we will deliver X amount of aircraft for the war effort. This is going to be a full court press for the war effort. We need to step up our aircraft manufacturing because we were very far behind in terms of aircraft production and development compared to the rest of the world. Mr. Litchfield actually resigned his post on the condition they would appoint him as president of Goodyear Aerospace. And that's where he focused all of his efforts throughout the war, both in Goodyear, Arizona, and at Akron, Ohio, where the other aircraft plant was. Very remarkable guy.
Well, yeah, and that connection to Akron is why, I mean, you've got the Wigwam. I mean, so much of kind of that classic West Valley really arose because of trying to lure folks from Akron to the desert.
Indeed. Yeah, it was a factory town. There's no two ways about it. To this day, I know you and I were talking about this earlier this week, Marshall. If you go north of the airport to the east of Litchfield Road, you'll notice all those houses look the same. Well, the reason is they were put there by Goodyear Aerospace for their workers. You know, we talk about how quickly things blew up in the 50s after air conditioning became convenient, thank God. But, you know, they broke ground on the factory on July 15th, 1941. There were 20 people there. You know, 23 if you count the executives that came out to visit. So by January of 42, the number was, we had 150 people working there. By January of 43, there were 5,000 people working there. By January of 45, counting the naval personnel, there were 8,000 people on that airport working around the clock.
Wow.
Throughout the war, they produced approximately 3 million pounds of airframes for the war effort alone. It's about 8,500 warplanes went through there. It's
wow.
Remarkable. It ended up going from 1941 not existing to 1945, the 11th most productive aircraft manufacturing and modification center in the entire country. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, quiet little Goodyear. Yeah.
Exactly. Quiet little Goodyear. Not so quiet.
Not at all. No.
All right. What was the first project at the airport?
Well, there's some great pictures of Mr. Litchfield himself right there. Yeah. Amazing guy. So the first project was actually flying boats, believe it or not. It's perfectly
so did these look like the car boats?
Yeah, not really. They literally look like a cross between a boat and a 4-engine bomber. They were PB2Y Coronados, they were called. And Goodyear had won a contract to develop and build the flight decks. So they basically built the cockpits. And that was another reason they picked the site, because Highway 80 had no underpasses. And they would load 2 of these cockpit sections on a flatbed truck, and they needed the clearance to get all the way to San Diego, where they would then literally lift the cockpit off of the truck, set it on the otherwise completed airframe. And, we think we're very slick when we say things like, well, we plug and play. That's a recent thing. Now, they were doing this in 1942. They left the factory in Goodyear complete. All the instruments, the control cables were all installed. You put it on the aircraft, you connected everything, energized it, and went flying. Really kind of remarkable. They built 208 flight decks there for these flying boats in the middle of the desert. It's the strangest things, right? And
indeed.
Yeah, it's when you look at the man hours it took, and you think, well, that's a relatively simple thing. It very much is not. I mean, that's the heart and the nexus for the entire aircraft, right? Is the cockpit. So the first one they built, the numbers the factory reported back to the Navy was it took 46,250 man hours to build that one flight deck. By the time they built the last one, by the time they built their 208th, they pared that all the way down to 10,600 man hours. A lot of fine detail work.
Yeah.
Pretty.
And just a lot of work.
And they were doing 20 a month by the time they ended in 43.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a picture of a privateer there. Or I'm sorry, not a privateer, a Coronado flying boat. You can see up the upper right-hand corner there. That's
is that why it's got such the big belly on it?
Exactly. So that's a hull. These aircraft could not land on land. They could be beached with beaching gear, but they were true flying boats. You can see the wingtips kind of look like they have a hull as well. That's because they rotate down 90 degrees. They're floats, so the aircraft doesn't tip over when it's in the water. And sadly, out of the 200 plus they built, there's only one left, and it's in Pensacola, Florida. And the Navy has done an absolutely brilliant job of restoring it. It looks brand new, just amazing. But this question is about the privateer, which is the aircraft below. You can see it there coming out of the hangar.
I thought that picture was showcasing how the doors worked.
Well, that was pretty fascinating too, really. And I actually got to be there when Lockheed turned over that building about 6-7 years ago. That was highly classified inside. I got to walk around with the owner, and he had energized the doors, re-greased them. They hadn't been opened in probably 40 years. And good old Navy hardware, they put power to it, and it opened perfectly without a single hiccup. It was pretty remarkable. But the privateer is relatively unknown, even in aviation circles, sadly. There was over 1,000 of these that came out of Goodyear alone. If anybody knows this aircraft, they're going to know it as a B-24 Liberator, right? Famously flown in combat by guys like Jimmy Stewart, right? If you've watched the movie Unbroken, that was the type of aircraft that Zamperini was flying on when he was shot down before he was taken prisoner by the Japanese. It was the most produced aircraft we had during the war. There's over 17,000 of them built, but the Navy had one they called the privateer. And the answer to this question is quite literally all of those were its mission. It was not designed to fly at high altitudes. It was designed as a low altitude, deep penetration interdiction attack aircraft. So if it was on the surface of the ocean, its job was to send it to the bottom of the ocean. They did long-range bombings of airfields. They never went much above 10,000 feet. These guys typically didn't even carry oxygen with them, unlike the guys flying them in Europe. They did reconnaissance, and then after the war, nearly 1,000 of these things came back to Goodyear, and the folks that had worked on 1,000 of these, getting them ready for war, removed all the guns from them, put big greenhouse doors and windows in them, and turned them into search and rescue birds. And the really cool thing is there's only about 7 of these airframes still left on the planet, and 2 of them are in the state, and the only flyable one in the state is at Casa Grande Airport right now. And the other one looks, it's stunning restoration down at P. Marion Space Museum in Tucson.
Okay.
That was a cool bird. I did just in preparation for tonight, I did a new calculation. When they built these, so 1,050 left the factory, right, by 45. In fact, they had a ramp full of these things when Japan surrendered at the airport. But the Navy contract had $100 million in 1945 funds dedicated to this project alone. That's the guns. This had airborne radar in it, one of the first rudimentary radars for anti-shipping. If we extrapolate that to today's bucks, that's over $1.5 billion. That was one of 7 production lines going on at the time.
Well, I mean, and I think that also, I mean, you mentioned like early radar, and that's one of the things that I know Goodyear was really working on in terms of at the facility just north of where the airport is now.
Absolutely. Yeah, just to the east, the whole Lockheed Martin facility, which is last known as, but it was Goodyear Aerospace from 45 to the 70s when it turned into Loral Corporation. They patented a device called synthetic aperture radar there. And I won't go too deep into that because my wife constantly accuses me of slipping into aviationese and no one knows what I'm saying. But to sum it up, it's the really amazing stuff that is from the nose of the SR-71 Blackbird all the way back to the engines. It's radar that can see through trees. It can paint a picture for you. I mean, they're remarkable.
Wow.
They invented that radar there in 1947. I actually had the honor of holding the original patent once, which Lockheed still has in their possession in California now. So
wow.
Remarkable what went on there. You know, just amazing stuff.
Indeed. All right. So after World War II, what was the primary mission of NAFLP?
Yeah, all of these things. They were still modding aircraft. They were storing aircraft, and they were making them go away. They're turning them into beer cans, essentially. One of the fascinating things is, since 1945 up until this very second, the mission of that airfield has not changed. They've added flight training, but aircraft modification, aircraft scrap is still going on. Aircraft storage is still going on. If you go to a Cleveland Indians or a Cincinnati Reds spring training game, you guys already know this. That's your backdrop, right? It's all those big tails out in the desert there to the east of the ball fields. Those aircraft are there being stored for the exact same reason they put them here in World War II, right? Kingman, Davis-Monthan, and Goodyear were the big storage sites. And the reason for that is outside of combat and bad piloting, the worst thing for an airplane is corrosion. And since we don't know what humidity feels like in Arizona 9 times out of 10, this is the perfect place to put them. I mean, I worked at Goodyear for 10 years, and the soil is tough enough. Our caliche soil is tough enough. You can pull large airliners over it with very little preparation, and it'll hold the weight. The Navy and the Air Force figured that out a long, long time ago. So after the war, they stored as many as, in one of those photos you had up there, there were 2,300 aircraft in the shot. So the one kind of in the center there, the upper right-hand one was taken in 1945 when there was a couple hundred airplanes there. By 47, the one in the lower left-hand corner, 1,000 airplanes there. By 1950, they kept the number above 2,000 until the base closure in 1968. And it was Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. I had the honor of meeting quite a few of the ground crews that would take care of the airplanes out there for the Navy. And there was a guy that he told me I was on the engine run crew. And I asked, well, what did that entail? And he said, well, we would get up in the morning, and for 8 hours, we would just go down the line starting the engines, powering up the systems, making sure that they were war ready should the call come. And it did come when Korea sparked up. In fact, the base got a commendation from the head of the Navy and the War Department for delivering well over 100% of their request to put warplanes on carriers off the peninsula. And this man that was on the engine crew said it was a really big deal. And that was my whole job. I started engines for 10 years. That's my whole job. He said, but the really cool thing is you can get on a wingtip at Yuma Road, and we would get in the airplanes. And at lunch, we would get back off the airplanes, but we never got on the ground because we just pop up onto the wing, walk to the wingtip, jump onto the next airplane, and then sit in the cockpit, and then jump to the next airplane. He said you could walk 1.5 miles on that airfield across wings and never touch the ground. There were that many airplanes crammed into that spot.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
Yeah,
so the Boeing B-29 is known as the aircraft which dropped the bomb on Hiroshima in Japan during World War II. Yeah. What else is it famous for dropping?
Yeah, other airplanes. If any of you have seen The Right Stuff, either the original or the Disney remake from a couple of years ago, you've seen this. When we were trying to break the sound barrier in 1947, these aircraft were rocket-powered, liquid oxygen rocket-powered aircraft. They could take off on their own, but it made a lot more sense to take them up into the thin air, drop them, and then light the candle off. So the aircraft that you just had a picture of up there it's a relatively famous airplane. It's known as Fertile Myrtle. And you can see behind the wing on the fuselage, on the body of the aircraft there, you see a big cutout. Well, that was a cutout to accommodate the tailplane of an airplane that's hanging in the Smithsonian with the Bell X-1, the first airplane to break the speed of sound, Chuck Yeager's bright orange bullet-looking airplane. The other aircraft was called the Douglas Skyrocket. So the X-1 was the Air Force's. The Skyrocket, the Douglas Skyrocket, was the Navy's. And this is the airplane that dropped the Skyrocket. I have the honor of calling a friend, a gentleman who actually flew this airplane out of Goodyear after the Navy sold it to the private world. Mr. Billy Walker, Captain Billy Walker, is in the Arizona Aviation Hall of Fame. The airplane had been there for some years after the Navy no longer had a need for it at Edwards, and a private owner bought it. And I'm proud to say the airplane still exists. And these photos, I have 4 other photos of this aircraft that were saved by a City of Phoenix employee who quite literally pulled them out of a trash can in the 70s, just after the Navy had left.
Oh.
He showed me what it was, and I realized what aircraft it was. After I picked my jaw up off the table, I contacted the gentleman who's very well known in the aviation world who owns the aircraft, and was able to provide him copies of his airplane, taken on the day it was retired from Navy service, which he'd never seen before. So he was pretty excited about that.
So you also just mentioned the Arizona Aviation Hall of Fame.
Yes, absolutely.
Why am I just hearing about this now for the first time?
We got to get you to Pima, man. Pima Air and Space Museum. That's where it's headquartered. It's amazing. It's in the Space Gallery. So if you go into the Space Gallery, there's a separate room, and there are I actually have the very, very precious honor of knowing quite a few people personally that are in that Hall of Fame. But, a lot of folks know that the Marine Corps ace Joe Foss lived in Arizona and Scottsdale for a very long time. Joe Foss is in it. A lot of aviation luminaries have wonderful portraits and little dedicatory plaques down at Pima. It's a wonderful Hall of Fame. Just some of the best pilots you'll ever see.
Wow.
Yeah. Worth the look.
Indeed. All right. So which brand of the service introduced the Sidewinder missile?
Believe it or not, it was the Navy. The Sidewinder is probably the most produced air-to-air missile in our country's history. One of the more successful. But in my research on the airport, and I've been researching it now since 2007, I found this picture and traced back the aircraft's lineage. This is one of the aircraft that actually qualified the missile for the Navy at the China Lake Weapons Testing Center. And I'm sad to report that after this aircraft did its yeoman's work qualifying the missile and getting it ready for service, and the Navy got it in service 8 years before the Air Force adopted it, I believe. This aircraft came to Goodyear, and several years later, it was sadly turned into beer cans. Oh, it met the scrapper's torch. Didn't make it.
Wow. All right. So, which branch of the service had the first aircraft specifically designed to carry a nuclear bomb?
People are shocked to learn that it was the Navy.
Why is the Navy up in the sky so much? I thought they were.
Yeah, the Navy. Well, I mean,
hold on, Ryan, just a moment.
Yeah.
So we have a question about the earlier about the China Lake.
Yeah, not in Arizona. I'm pulling up the actual location right now. It's still it's in Kern County, California. And it's still a naval base, NAF China Lake. It's now called the Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake. So it's basically Navy, U.S. Navy Research and Development.
Okay.
Yeah. And if any of you
so then back to why is the Navy in the sky so much? I thought they were on boats. I mean, they should be on one of those flying boats.
Never say that to a naval aviator. they'll take it kind of hard. So during everybody knows the basic history of Pearl Harbor, right? So all our battleships were caught largely at dock, and the interesting thing was the carriers were out on the open sea, and World War II quickly became, rather than a surface war, it became beyond the horizon air war. And if you watch, say, like the most recent movie that came out about it was Midway, the remake of Midway, which the first Midway in the 70s, not a great film. This one was most recent was much more historically accurate. The force of the Navy multiplied by the Naval Air Arm became literally, it just changed the face of naval warfare. And it still does, which is why the preeminent ships in the Navy to the day are still flat tops, are still carriers. So when the atomic age came to be, the Navy needed a way to get nuclear weapons delivered on target. And don't forget that in World War II, there was this wonderful joint branch mission called the Doolittle Raid. Jimmy Doolittle led the raid off of an aircraft carrier. Well, an aircraft carrier, the Navy had to get the Army Air Force bombers within striking distance of Japan to make that happen, because we didn't have anything that had that much range. So they are an absolutely integral part of national defense. And it's really something when you can take a warplane base and move it at will around the globe. And that's what aircraft carriers can do. So when the atomic age cropped up, they needed a way to deliver nuclear devices off an aircraft carrier. So they built the airplane that you just showed a picture of, which was called the North American A.J. Savage. This was a strange airplane. I've met two pilots who flew them. And after they spent a significant amount of time complaining about all of the growing pains this aircraft had, it had hydraulic systems that were twice as powerful as anything in the system. It was literally responsible for a whole new set of hardware to go throughout the U.S. military aviation world, because it was literally cutting holes in the fuselage with its hydraulic pressure when they'd fail. It was also a hybrid airplane. you see the two radial engines on it, right? Those are reciprocating, air-breathing engines. Those are Pratt & Whitney R2800s. But what you can't see is that buried in the fuselage, there's also a turbojet. So this airplane could actually be launched from a carrier carrying a nuclear weapon. And as I was briefed by the two pilots I met that were deployed with them, and one of the gentlemen was on the shakedown cruises of this. He actually tested the aircraft out of Norfolk, Virginia, and went on the first shakedown cruises. He said, great thing about the airplane is when everything worked, you could fly it like a fighter. In fact, a lot of the pilots they trained to fly it were fighter pilots, because it was what was known as a very hot airplane. He said the other fun thing we could do was, if you were flying a bomber, and this was an attack airplane, the fighter guys would always make fun of you. They'd go, sailing past you real fast and make you feel bad. He said the thing was, the fighters in that era when this airplane came out were relatively slow. And he said what we would do was we would pull up next to them. We would feather and shut down both propeller engines and then slowly pull away with the jet they didn't know we had, and just confounding these poor fighter pilots to no end. He said the terrifying thing about the mission, however, you had to do that because in the face of what you were given as your job was you had to have some sort of humor every day, because your job was to launch off of a carrier very close to enemy territory. And he said most mission specs gave them 30 minutes of fuel reserves after they dropped on a target in Russia. So you weren't making it home. You were going to fly deep into Russia. You were going to drop a nuclear bomb on a city, and you had 30 minutes of fuel to fly away from your target and then try to escape and evade. He was very, very happy, the one gentleman who told me this, to get promoted out of the Savage Squadron.
Understandable.
Yeah.
But that's funny. It's like a little sleeper plane.
Yeah, it was remarkable. And again, only one left, and it's at Pensacola as well in Florida. The AWACS.
All right. So when did the first airborne warning and control system, or AWAC aircraft, cease service?
We've still got these things in service now, but believe it or not, they took a Lockheed Constellation airliner, which incidentally is your background right now, Marshall. That's a Connie. I'm that kind of dork. I can tell from the engine nacelle. That's a Connie. One of my favorite airplanes. And they slapped a gigantic radar on top of it. And this is airborne warning and control. So these are the guys that have bigger radars and can see beyond where the fighters and the attack aircraft can see. And they can say, hey, you've got danger aircraft. You've got bogeys at this orientation to your flight. Go get them. And again, the Navy kind of led the charge in this. And this is important to Goodyear and Arizona history, because as you mentioned, there is a tremendous amount of radar research and invention going on right there at Goodyear. So even though this was a Navy base until 1968, there were Air Force, Army aircraft, civilian aircraft coming in, landing at the Navy base, and then crossing across the railroad tracks into Goodyear Aerospace for radar modifications, for systems modifications. So it was very much a joint use thing. And this is part of that heritage. This was Goodyear Aerospace doing what they did best with the kind of radar magic that they came up with over the years. And that Lockheed eventually purchased and inherited, and continues to this day now out of California, sadly, no longer at Goodyear. But
Indeed, the famous aerial demonstration team. What were they called?
Blue Angels. Yeah, and I apologize to all of my Air Force friends for saying this. I still think the best jet demonstration team on the planet. Nobody flies tighter, faster, and sharper than the Blues. Thunderbirds are great, but the Blues are something else. This was, interestingly, a time, this was in the 60s. They are based, as most folks know, in Pensacola, Florida. But the weather in Pensacola, Florida can occasionally stink. We get scared if we see a cloud 50 miles away in Arizona, so we got great flying weather. So the Navy said, hey, boys, go out there and play. Interestingly, this was at the same time that the Air Force Thunderbirds were based and practicing out of Luke Air Force Base, and there was a lot of shenanigans that went on. They were famous for kind of pranking one another. But there are actually, if you go on YouTube and you search Blue Angels, Goodyear, or Litchfield Park, Arizona, you can actually see some restored color footage of air shows and demonstrations of their practices out here in the 60s. Absolutely amazing stuff. And believe it or not, if you go to the Naval Museum, the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, one of the aircraft pictured in that photograph is on display. It's the only F-11 they have on display at Pensacola, and that was actually an airplane that flew at Goodyear.
Wow.
Yeah. And Pima actually has one in that paint on display right now inside Hangar 1 in Tucson. So encourage everybody to go look at that. You can get up close and personal with it. It's a beautiful airplane.
All right. So what famous public figure both flew with a Blue Angel aircraft and was an active member of the Arizona Air National Guard?
Mr. Goldwater. A lot of us know that Barry Goldwater was a pilot. He was actually one of the founding members of the Arizona Air National Guard. In fact, the base at Sky Harbor is named after him, and the live fire range down between Yuma and Sierra Vista, Arizona, is actually named the Barry Goldwater Range. He was a fanatic about aviation. I've met several members of his family over the years, and one of his nephews, said something I've never forgotten. He said, Uncle Barry was a really amazing guy. He always said that his political career was his honor and duty to his country, but flying was his passion. And the photograph there on the right is is the good senator the day that he got to fly with the Blue Angels at Goodyear Airport. And I spoke to the son of one of those Blue Angel pilots about a decade or so ago, and I said, "Did your dad ever talk about the flight with Senator Goldwater?" And he goes, "Oh yeah. Dad said they were always told, like, well, don't let the public figures fly. Just don't let them break the equipment." And they briefed the senator on that, and he goes, "Yeah, but you're going to let me fly, right? I was a fighter pilot." And they said, "Well, sir, we really can't." Long story short, they let him fly the airplane. And according to that pilot's son, Dad said Senator Goldwater did everything he could to pull the wings off that airplane, but he was a good stick. And the photograph, I have two photographs of him with the Blues. One is he's in the black suit with the shoestring tie and the horn rim glasses, and he's looking very, very Goldwater-ish, very politically official. And in this one, he's just got done flying a fighter, and he has the biggest grin on his face. That's a happy guy. That's a flying grin if I ever saw one.
Indeed. All right. How long did it take the Naval Air Force facility at Litchfield Park to close?
Nearly 5 years, believe it or not. It was actually just after Christmas in 1963. The Pentagon sent word down. It's like, we're going to put all military aircraft assets that'll be in storage or being prepared for scrap. We're going to put them in one place. And that's still to this day going on at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, the Boneyard, right? So the Navy had to essentially liquidate. They stopped bringing aircraft in largely around 1963, but they had to liquidate what was on site. And again, they're carrying, in 1963, when this came down, I have an article from one of the fleet magazines, and it said there's over 2,300 aircraft on site. This was like of June of 63, right? And that was helicopters, jets, stuff from World War II. They said there were over 38 types of airframes in storage on the field, right? They had to hire, by some reports, as many as 800 to 1,000 people to get this kind of mammoth task done, as then they slowly drew down the inventory. So the numbers shook out like this until 68 when they finally got everything gone. They actually were able to fly 615 airplanes down. 1,000 airplanes were just scrapped. And to this day, if you go to MC85 and Estrella Parkway on the northeast corner, there's a big metal recycling plant. The original 4 or 5 smelters from the base are still there. That big pile of slag metal was started by the naval base. Airplanes are the foundation of that scrapyard.
Wow.
And they were actually they had 112 airplanes that they couldn't fly, but if you put them on a 45-degree angle on a flatbed truck, you could truck them down the interstate. So they actually trucked 112 of these things down to Davis-Monthan. And that last slide, you had a picture of about 6 or so guys standing around a cake. That was the last aircraft to be on the Navy rolls to leave the airport. So they baked it a cake, and that was, sadly, for those 6 gentlemen, most of them had worked there for over 20 years. That was their last day of work. That's a pretty, after that, the Navy turned the keys over to the city of Phoenix, and Naval Air Facility Litchfield Park became Phoenix Goodyear Airport. No, that was the end of Navy days at Goodyear.
Wow. Now, as we so I always like to ask people how they did. I mean, Sarah already said she got 0 out of 10. I think I probably did about as well as that. I mean, so, but I mean, what I find really fascinating is, I mean, that it's like, you know, most people know like the technology that Motorola was creating, but most people don't realize how much was going on out in the West Valley. And
Yes.
It keeps getting forgotten, or I mean, that's why I really wanted to do this, because it was like that whole Goodyear area. I mean, was teeming with so much technology and basically helped Arizona become what it is.
Absolutely. I mean, it's still, I mean, we just completed the state aeronautics department, the ADOT Aeronautics just completed a study last year, an economic impact study. And every year, aerospace in the state contributes over $121 billion to the state economy. That's its economic impact. It's over 20% of jobs in Arizona are dedicated to aviation and aerospace. So what the groundwork that airports like Tucson International and Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Goodyear, manufacturing centers like that, right? Raytheon's still in Tucson. Lockheed, until 3 or 4 years ago, was still in Goodyear. Honeywell down at Sky Harbor, which started as Garrett Air Research. The foundations all those companies laid, as well as all the military bases. I mean, we had Luke, we had Goodyear, we've got Yuma. To this day, you can fly all over the state and literally see dozens of abandoned training fields from World War II. They're just scattered everywhere in the state. That foundation created this massive aerospace and aviation economy that I'm proud to call my profession to this day. I'm the luckiest bum I know. I get paid to be at an airport every day. And it's because of history like this, right? That somebody in 1940 said, you know, this is a good place to park, fly, work on, build airplanes. Thank God they did.
I didn't realize it was still that much of an active part of the state's economy, because you don't really hear about it. I mean,
yeah, you wouldn't think, right? But even my airport at Chandler, I mean, I've dispatched in the past 6 months, I've seen jets fly as far away nonstop as Puerto Rico. We get arrivals from all over the country on a daily basis. It's not just a community airport. If you look at its footprint, and that goes for most airports in the state, we're getting intra and interstate traffic all the time. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And we're building on the foundation blocks all these folks laid back in the honestly in the 30s and 40s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Litchfield. Oh my gosh.
That's right. It's funny, you know, I've interviewed probably close to 50 or 60 former employees of the Navy base, and just a handful and about equal of the factory. And even the Navy guys always called it Mr. Litchfield's Airport. That's something in and of itself is a pretty amazing thing, because I had a retired rear admiral tell me, you either got to be an admiral or preferably an admiral that got killed in combat in the Navy to get a base named after you. He said that the Department of the Navy named a base after a man who spent 0 time in the military, says what regard they held Paul Litchfield. And I mean, the man spent 0 time in the military, and the Navy named an entire air facility after him. That's really something.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, Ryan, thank you so much. I mean, it's kind of like my mind is just kind of spinning with so many stories and facts. And and we've just scratched the tip of the iceberg.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I tell everybody, if you want a tour of an airport, look up Chandler Airport, come see me. I'll give you a tour. We'll get you up close to personal some aircraft, get looking at, we love sharing aviation.
Oh, actually, I might do that, because that's one of the things. Okay.
Yes.
So I might even bring a few friends with me. We shall see.
Absolutely. So, I'll get a book.
Right.
We'll have a great time.
It's like, I love how it started off an early economic engine of the state, and still is, but it's now something that's not really talked about,
right?
Which is so interesting. So
yeah, it's great stuff. Yeah.
So Ryan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing obviously your passion.
It's my ruling passion. There's no doubt about it.
And I think your wife would agree with that.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, she's that's why I invite other people to the airport. She's just sick of hearing it. She just
That's great. So yeah, Gene, I agree. I think we're gonna have to put together a little group to go out and take a tour of the Chandler Airport.
100%. You bet.
Sounds good. Well, Ryan, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your night.
I will. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh my gosh, that was so cool. Great stories about things I didn't realize how influential Arizona was for so much. So, it's so funny as we were chatting, and I realized I probably should have, from the vault, I decided that we should do something, spot that actually Ryan talked about, which is the Pima Air and Space Museum, because it really is such a cool facility. And it really started off with the government would line up all kind of the oddball planes on the street for people to go and just kind of gawk at. And when they got too many of them, they finally said, well, you should dispose of them. And what they decided to do was basically take them across the street and deposit them in this facility. So they've got a wide variety of things and hangars sitting outside. You've got, some of the planes that are featured here, you have like the Super Guppy that was built to fly giant moon rocket parts around. You've got, from Top Gun, you've got the Tomcat from the movie Top Gun. You've got this really interesting history. The Bumblebee, which at one point was the world's smallest plane, as well as the Phoenix Mars lander from NASA and the University of Arizona's lab. So, they really do have so much cool stuff. And I didn't realize, or I would have included the fact that they have the Arizona Air Pilot Hall of Fame. I'm going to have to go see that now. Oh my gosh. I think there might be another tour in that as well. Wow. Oh, Ryan, thank you so much for sharing and bringing your passion, your love of this. It's kind of infectious, in case you can't tell. So now I know Anita's already shared it, but this is why I always say you should share, because there's always going to be some really cool stories that you don't really get to hear anywhere else. Now, coming up next week, we have CC Marie, who's going to be one of our readers for the Banned Book Week. She is going to be talking about some of her favorite places across Arizona, some of those little nooks and crannies that you might not know about. She's going to talk and tell us about her adventures going to them. So, I always love to hear from you all. So if you ever have any stories, suggestions, comments, please drop me a line. Now, as we say good night, I want to give a shout out to Chris and Cole who created that video. We've actually been talking about a new video so that there's something else. And as well as always, cheers to PJ. They are doing a soft opening, I think, of a restaurant this very evening, which they might be about to close. I don't know. Hoping that's all going well out in Gilbert. So cheers. And I thought it would be fun, since we've been talking about Goodyear, we're going to end with a Goodyear commercial. That's shockingly enough, I chose a fun one. Oh no, not that. All right, everybody. So I will see you here next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great night.
What are the hot cars wearing this year? Boots. Wide boots, GT tires from Goodyear.
These boots are made for rolling wherever cars are hot. Wide boots GT from Goodyear. What sports cars need, they've got.
Check the specs. Built low and wide like racing tires. Low cord angle. 4 plies polyester cord. Track tested at 130.
Wide boots GT from Goodyear. What sports cars need, they've got.
If you drive a high-performance car, you need Goodyear's finest high-performance tire.